There is a quiet, almost imperceptible moment when the world starts to feel strange, not because it has changed, but because you've begun to truly see. This is how the soul's voluntary exile begins, not with a scream, but with a whisper. A calling that doesn't come from the earth or from time or logic, it comes from within, but so deep within. It feels like it's coming from beyond, as if heaven had left a tiny crack open, just enough for you to feel the breeze of home. You look around, and nothing feels natural anymore. Conversations seem rehearsed, desires manufactured, days recycled. And you silently ask yourself, what's wrong with me? And the world answers, everything. But something deeper responds, nothing. Everything is finally right, because the first sign that you're leaving this world is the sense of strangeness, a feeling that everything you were taught isn't what frees you, but what keeps you asleep. You're not going crazy. You're waking up from an ancient trance. This discomfort, this feeling of not belonging, is an old rite of passage. In the desert traditions, monks spoke of the dark night of the soul, the moment when everything solid begins to dissolve, not to punish you, but to reveal. Because before you find the eternal, you must lose what is false. Contemplate this. Today, when you feel like you no longer fit into the world, don't try to force your shape. Instead, sit in silence. Touch the ground with the palm of your hand. Breathe slowly and say to yourself, I am between worlds, and this is sacred. Keep an invisible altar in your daily life. It could be a pause, a glance at the sky, a silent gesture of reverence to the mystery. In these small rituals, the invisible becomes visible. You still feel like something is wrong, but for the first time, that wrongness tastes like truth. And this is the beginning, because the second sign is not about feeling anymore. It's about listening, not with your ears. The second sign that you're leaving this world is not visible to the eyes. It is heard by the soul. And that kind of listening doesn't involve the ears. There is a sound that doesn't belong to, this time, a subtle, almost timid vibration that cuts through the noise of everyday life. It shows up in the silence between two sentences, in the space between one thought and the next. In that instant when you wake up and for a second forget who you are, that's when the voice speaks, not as a sentence, but as a knowing. You start to notice it when ordinary words no longer nourish you. Conversations feel hollow, advice sounds recycled, and even your own prayers begin to feel mechanical. That's because the language you're seeking isn't written. It's felt. It comes from the source. And everything that comes from the source is more felt than said. And then you find yourself facing a paradox. You're surrounded by people, yet you feel alone. You're hearing everything, but nothing touches you. It's not deafness, it's discernment. The soul has started to reject dead nourishment. You no longer want answers, you want fertile silence, and that is dangerous to the old self. In ancient times, sages called this listening with the inner heart. It was said that when this kind of listening awakened, the senses of the outer world would begin to fail, not from defect, but from transcendence. Like when you close your eyes, not to sleep, but to see more deeply. Practice this. Find a place where you can be silent, not just outwardly, but inwardly. Sit for a few minutes with your spine upright and your heart uncovered. Don't think, just listen. Sense if there is a presence behind your thoughts, a presence that doesn't speak, but watches you with compassion. Maybe in that moment you'll hear a truth no one has ever told you, because it doesn't come from outside. It's always been there, buried beneath the noise of the world. The outer world says, you're disconnecting, you're losing focus. But the inner world whispers, you're coming home. And once you hear that voice, even if only for a second, nothing will ever be the same again. But be warned. The third sign comes like an earthquake. It arrives when you begin to see what others pretend not to. The third sign doesn't arrive gently. It breaks, it wounds. It tears the blindfold from your eyes, like an arrow being pulled from your chest, with pain, but also with liberation. You begin to see, not like before, with eyes conditioned by centuries of falsehood, but with the raw vision of awakened consciousness. And what you see is not beautiful, because the beautiful world you were promised was just a stage, and now the curtain has fallen. You see the hollow smiles, the systems that feed on fear, the daily rituals that look like life, but are really just survival. You see how everyone is pretending, including you. This vision doesn't arrive as a gift. It comes as a sacred curse, because once you see, you can no longer pretend you don't. And the price of vision is exile. You stop belonging to the old world, but you haven't yet arrived in the new. You're in limbo, between what was comfortable and what is true. In the mystic traditions, this was known as the burning vision. They said that when it ignites, the false begins to burn. Relationships, habits, narratives, everything not rooted in truth begins to fall apart. You may feel isolated, judged, misunderstood. But this is not punishment, it's consequence. Because when the soul sees, the world takes offense. Illusion fears exposure, and the system protects itself by casting out those who see. So when you begin to see, don't run. Don't fight, just see with steady eyes and a tender heart. Practice inner vision with courage. Every day, close your eyes for a few moments and ask, what within me is still choosing blindness? Don't seek an answer. Let the question burn within you. That is the ritual, and there will come a moment, perhaps brief, perhaps eternal, when you will see even yourself in that light. You'll see the self you constructed, the masks, the defenses, and you'll understand. True vision begins when you stop running from yourself, but be prepared. Because the fourth sign is not just about seeing, it's about losing. Losing everything that cannot survive the light of truth. The fourth sign doesn't come with thunder or disaster. It happens in silence, like dry leaves falling from a tree that doesn't resist the autumn. Suddenly, things begin to disappear from your life. People who once felt central start to drift away, without conflict, without explanation. Dreams you nurtured for years start to feel hollow, like abandoned houses. Habits, clothes, places lose their flavor. And the strangest part, you don't feel pain, you feel relief, but the ego mourns. It cries out. It calls this loss, failure, loneliness, because the ego measures life by what you keep. The soul measures it by what you release. You're not being punished, you're being emptied, so that you can finally be filled. In the language of the ancients, this was called kenosis, the sacred emptying, an inevitable process for those who wish to cross the threshold of consciousness. The old must die so the new can breathe. But the modern world never taught us how to die, only how to accumulate. So you resist. You try to save relationships that have already ended. You try to revive versions of yourself that have already passed. But the more you hold on, the more it hurts, because the pain isn't in the loss, it's in the resistance to loss. Contemplate this. What you lost may never have truly been yours. Perhaps it was only lent to you until you learned what you needed to. And now, the time has come to let it go. Make this a ritual. Every night before sleep, close your eyes and ask yourself with honesty, what in me is trying to stay alive even though it's already dead? Then imagine yourself releasing it, not with anger, with gratitude. That simple, invisible gesture is an act of deep spiritual courage. Because in letting go of what is dead, you make space for what never dies. But pay attention, because the fifth sign is not just about what you lose, it's about what begins to awaken within you. And it's frightening, because it doesn't come from the mind, It rises from the abyss. The fifth sign is not an arrival, but an emergence, as if something long hidden suddenly begins to surface. It's not new, but it felt forgotten. A silent force, almost ancestral, begins to pulse inside you. It doesn't ask permission. It simply awakens. You feel as if you are being inhabited by something vast, impersonal, and at the same time, too intimate to name. A presence, a quiet fire that burns without consuming. It doesn't shout. It moves you. It doesn't show you paths. It burns the maps. It is the abyss within you, the place where the soul touches the infinite. But the abyss is not comfortable. It pulls you out of control, and the mind begins to panic because it was never designed to handle mystery. It wants to know, and the abyss answers with silence. It wants direction, and the abyss offers presence. You catch yourself saying things without knowing where they come from, making choices that defy all logic, yet bring an unexpected peace. Something deeper than reason has taken the helm, and you begin to suspect you were never truly in control. In the Hermetic tradition, this was called the awakening of the hidden center, an invisible point within the self where the divine and the human meet, an inner portal where time bends and identity dissolves. But to access it, you must die a little each day. You are not going crazy. You are being moved through. Something greater than you is trying to live through you, and the only requirement is that you don't resist. Today, in silence, place both hands over your chest and close your eyes. Breathe deeply and say to yourself, without speaking, "May what is true in me take its rightful place." Stay like this for a few minutes. Don't try to feel anything. Just surrender to the gesture, because it is not feeling that opens the abyss. It is surrender. And the more you allow this presence, the more it begins to transform. Not the world outside, but the world within. And with that transformation, the sixth sign is born. The loss of pleasure in everything that used to distract you, because now only truth satisfies. The sixth sign doesn't hurt like the others. It frustrates, it confuses, and it silences, not from a lack of words, but from the absence of appetite. The things that once gave you pleasure now leave you bored. Parties begin to feel loud. Achievements, empty. Distractions, exhausting. Everything that once served to fill you now reveals how deeply you were just numbing yourself. What once was pleasure is now noise. What once was escape now feels like a cage, and you find yourself in a strange kind of emptiness, because you haven't yet discovered what truly nourishes you. But you can no longer digest what used to. This is the soul's fast. In the wisdom of the deserts, the monks used to say, when God begins to draw a soul to himself, he first empties it of all false flavors, like cleansing the palate before a sacred feast. But the in-between is bitter. You try to revive old pleasures, but something in you no longer allows it. It's not that you've become rigid or sad. It's that you're in transition between the pleasures of the world and the delights of the spirit, and the body feels it. It feels boredom, restlessness, a subtle unease, but the spirit smiles, because finally, you've stopped seeking outside what can only be found within. Today, practice a ritual of silence. Choose a moment when you feel the impulse to distract yourself, and instead, just pause. Close your eyes, breathe. Observe the impulse, observe the emptiness that follows, and stay there, without seeking anything. Just observe. It is in that space between desire and the absence of it that true hunger is born. The hunger of the soul for God, for truth, for essence, and with that hunger comes the seventh sign. You begin to remember who you were before the world taught you to forget. The seventh sign cannot be learned. It emerges like an ancient memory awakening within silence. It's not an ordinary memory made of dates and events. It's a memory of essence, a remembrance of who you've always been. before you learned to become who the world wanted. You begin to feel that something in you is older than your story, older than your childhood. It's as if there were a secret name inside you, a name that was never spoken, yet always echoed in your deepest longing. And then everything starts to make sense. And at the same time, everything loses meaning. You realize that the pain that always followed you wasn't a flaw, but a compass. That the loneliness wasn't punishment, but a calling. That the emptiness wasn't absence, but sacred space, where the eternal could finally descend. You are remembering. And in that remembering, the persona begins to die. The image of yourself, built from borrowed words, unprocessed wounds, and second-hand desires, begins to crumble. And the true self, the one with no name, no form, no fear, begins to reveal itself, shyly, like a dawn rising through fog. In the tradition of the initiates, this was known as the turning point. The moment when the soul began to recognize itself again in the mirror of eternity. Not as ego, but as presence. Practice this. Today, look at an old photo of yourself from when you were a child and gaze into that face with reverence. Then close your eyes and ask, what within me remains untouched by everything I've lived? Breathe, feel, honor that part of you as a living altar, because when you remember, everything around you starts to change. But nothing outside has truly changed. Only your eyes have returned to seeing with the innocence of spirit. And with that remembrance comes the eighth sign, a growing sense that you are living in two worlds at once. The eighth sign is not clear. It is paradoxical. You begin to live in two worlds and yet belong fully to neither. On one side, the familiar world, concrete, predictable, functional. The routines, the names, the duties, the identities, it's still there, but it feels distant, as if you're watching life instead of living it. You fulfill roles, speak with people, participate, but inwardly, you're absent, silent, observing on. The other side, something formless, an inner world pulsing with mystery, where time bends, where even silence feels alive. In that space, a single breath becomes a prayer, a glance becomes a revelation. You sense a deeper reality behind everything, but can't explain it. This is the threshold of crossing. You haven't left yet, but you can't return either. You are between two worlds, like the shaman who walks among the living and the spirits, like the monk who inhabits both the monastery and the infinite at once, and it exhausts you, because the body still belongs to the old world, but the soul is already walking in the new. Time becomes strange, relationships feel fragile, words feel limiting. There are moments when everything seems unbearably heavy, and others when everything overflows with beauty. You are learning to dwell in the invisible, while still walking among the visible. Ancient texts called this the time of crossing, a sacred moment in which the soul is tested in its fidelity to the truth, because this is where many turn back. They grow tired, they forget, they cling to what is still tangible, but those who continue are transformed. Today, practice the ritual of divided presence. In a simple moment of your day, washing your hands, walking, gazing at the sky, silently say to yourself, I am here, but I am also beyond, and feel it. Feel what exists between the two worlds. Honor that space as sacred, because you are about to enter the ninth sign, and the ninth is not gentle. It is an end, a necessary collapse, the fall before the flight. The ninth sign doesn't arrive with glory, it arrives with ruin. It is the moment when everything falls apart, and for the first time you see yourself naked before the vastness of what you truly are, and of what you never were. Here, the soul no longer feels like it's awakening. It feels like it's dying. You ask yourself, what's happening to me? And no answer comes, not from outside, not from within. There is only silence. A silence so deep, it feels like abandonment. But it's not the world abandoning you, it's the old world being torn out of you, violently if needed. The collapse is real, mental, emotional, existential. Nothing makes sense anymore. Nothing brings comfort, not faith, not books, not teachers, not even hope. This is the true threshold, the moment where many scream, retreat, give up, because everything in you begs for relief, and none comes. Because it's not relief you need, it's rebirth. In the mystic tradition, this was known as the death of the false self, the final stage before the last crossing, the point at which the soul is stripped of everything, even its spirituality, because even that can become an escape. In this state, the world loses all taste, but spirit has not yet descended. You feel yourself among ruins. Nothing holds you anymore, not pleasure, not meaning, not even the sacred, and it is here on that cold, answerless ground that something is revealed. You are none of what you believed yourself to be, and that is freedom. Today, sit with your pain. No distraction, no justification, no escape. Just feel. Touch the ground, close your eyes, and say to yourself, if everything falls, I will remain, because in this dark place the false dies, and the true has not yet arrived, and maybe it never will, in the way you expect. Because here is where the apparent journey ends, and the silence of the spirit begins. You meditate, but still run from yourself. You seek light, but still feed the shadow. You long for peace, but still cling to the noise that steals it. What in you still resists the quiet? How many more circles will you walk before changing your path? You are here because something inside you still wants to wake up, choose a new path, or keep feeding the same noise.